Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be playing devil's advocate for Warner Brothers, defending perhaps the worst, most foolish decision the studio has made specifically regarding its DC Entertainment brand. That is the studio's infamous mandate that different live-action versions of certain DC Comics characters cannot appear concurrently in theatrical films and on TV or streaming series. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I'm currently at 497 subscribers and am really trying to make it over that last little hurdle to 500 by the end of this year. I post film, book, and TV series reviews. I do opinion pieces on entertainment, news, and affairs. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. I recently released a new short mystery called The Intruder. There's a link to it in my video description below, and I encourage you to check it out as well. With that in mind, and without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into it. So I was inspired to make this video in light of the cancellation of the CW's Superman and Lois TV show. When that show was canceled, there was plenty of suspicion that James Gunn, David Zaslav, and the new Warner Brothers Discovery regime were responsible because they did not want an alternative live-action Superman project to interfere with James Gunn's Superman but not Superman movie that'll be coming in 2025. That speculation was initially considered to be relatively baseless because most people who understood such matters knew that the most major contributing factor to Superman and Lois's cancellation was the sale of the CW network to Nexstar. Nexstar wanted to focus less on creating superhero shows and other programming that it's very costly to produce and focus more on airing reruns and other content that would cost them peanuts to produce and that would thus lead to bigger returns on investments. It was understood that Nexstar wanted to do that because the main way that network TV shows make money is by airing ads during commercial breaks, and because the profits from doing that for the CW network has shrunk to a level that no longer justified certain production costs, especially for shows like Superman and Lois that were critical darlings but that did not draw massive viewership. Bitsie Tulloch, who played Lois Lane in Superman and Lois, actually did an infamous interview in which she double-talked around the cancellation issue to avoid answering questions about it and in order to hype up James Gunn's film Superman. However, the CW's president of entertainment, Brad Schwartz, admitted that though the Nexstar business did play a role in Superman and Lois's termination, there was also indeed a mandate by Warner Brothers Discovery that the show be canceled because the company did not want a competing live-action Superman adaptation in the marketplace during the time when James Gunn's film Superman would be in theaters. And I'm not trying to hate on James Gunn here, because the word on the street is that he was actually supportive of giving Superman and Lois another 1 or 2 seasons to tie up the show's loose ends in the first place. But then again, I don't know, maybe his reasons for doing that were selfish in that he did not want to draw yet more fan hate for canceling yet another popular superhero universe after he'd already canceled the Snyderverse and was dealing with fan hate over that. Nevertheless, just thinking about the Superman and Lois situation put me in remembrance of, well, all those other shady times that Warner Brothers most definitely did cancel live-action DC Comics related television shows or storylines or characters even before the Discovery merger, in service to their unwritten rule that certain popular DC Comics characters cannot appear in live action on TV or in streaming series at the same time that they're either appearing in theatrical films or are even being considered for appearances in theatrical films. This really is one of the worst, most foolish decisions that Warner Brothers has made in recent history regarding its DC Entertainment brand, like doing a prestige Batman show for HBO or putting Joker and Harley Quinn in the CW's Arrow is going to make fans less invested in watching a theatrical Batman movie. Like having Deathstroke or Deadshot or Amanda Waller in Arrow is going to make fans less invested in seeing those characters in a Suicide Squad film. Like having a live-action Green Lantern in Arrow or in the CW's The Flash or in an HBO series would make fans less invested in seeing a Green Lantern movie. like having Ted Kord's Blue Beetle in Arrow or Booster Gold in the CW's Legends of Tomorrow's earlier seasons would stop people from wanting to watch those same characters in theatrically released movies. And that's not even touching the hypocrisy of how this is the same Warner Brothers studio that felt it was okay to have a competing Flash show or a Supergirl show with a competing live-action Superman and Lex Luthor and Martian Manhunter in the Arrowverse. Nevertheless, I was recently very bored, so I decided to do this video just for laughs, in which I play devil's advocate for Warner Brothers and justify the studio's embargo decision, despite how I just said and still believe that it was one of the worst and most foolish decisions that the studio has made regarding the DC Entertainment brand in recent history. This little case of mine is short and simple, with only two main points. First, I suspect that a major reason for Warner Brothers' embargo decision was the company's understanding of one very important lesson, which is that it needed to avoid watering down the DC Entertainment cinematic brand with a flood of subpar live-action content featuring its most bankable characters. Honestly, that's a lesson that Disney could stand to learn regarding its handling of the MCU content since Avengers Endgame. But suffice it to say that Warner Brothers, despite its many misfires regarding DC Comics content, has always had a very clear understanding of just how valuable characters like the Justice League members and their roster of allies and enemies are as properties for film adaptation. Warner Brothers understood that it needed to be very conscious of how it allowed its most bankable DC Comics characters to be represented, especially in live-action mediums that would inherently draw stronger opinions and more lasting memories from fans than would animated mediums. You can't throw a live-action Batman or Green Lantern or Wonder Woman willy-nilly into just any DC Comics-inspired network or streaming series. There's a good chance that going there will lead to those characters being represented with subpar writing, subpar costume design, subpar CGI, because network TV shows and most streaming shows don't have the same budget and time to get those things right as do major motion pictures. I mean, just for one example, DC Entertainment fans have been joking for years about the CW Arrowverse's garbage CGI, or how cheap some of the superhero costumes looked, or even the way that Smallville, before Arrow, used to have its superhero characters wear gaudy civilian clothing, evocative of the more iconic comic book costumes. So if Warner Brothers allowed those tentpole characters like indeed Batman or Wonder Woman or Green Lantern to pop up without restraint in network TV series, or even in every little streaming series that requested the right to use them, it could very easily create a situation in which their subpar representation on the small screen caused substantial portions of a valuable audience to become disenchanted with any potential feature films headlined by or inclusive of those same characters. Batman particularly has been Warner Brothers' best-selling superhero in the movies since probably Chris Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. The company does not want to risk watering down that brand and compromising future Batman movie profits by allowing even one audience member to sour on the character after watching a poor live-action representation of him on a network TV show or even a streaming show, especially given the dire financial straits that the company has been experiencing recently, being in $40+ billion of debt and all. They don't want to risk losing even one unnecessary dollar. And all of that brings me to my second point, which is that most of Warner Brothers' decisions to preclude those tentpole characters from appearing in live action outside of movies were actually decisions to preclude those characters from appearing on the CW, and specifically in the CW's Arrowverse. And that's a very important distinction, because just to say this, the CW is and long has been a nothing network. One focused heavily on empty, formulaic storytelling meant to satisfy the lustful teenage gaze, to champion the political left, and to make being queer seem like the best and bravest decision that anyone could ever make. Yeah, the CW used to be something, especially in its earliest days, and even before that, when it was the WB, when it was still a relatively serious network, when it was airing shows like Gilmore Girls, the first few seasons of Smallville, the first few seasons of Supernatural, and a few other shows that were dominating cultural conversations amongst young people. However, by the time Arrow started airing, the CW was pretty much the bottom of the barrel in terms of live action entertainment and the butt of jokes all over Hollywood amongst those who understood the entertainment business. Mark Guggenheim has even said on record that the CW was about to be dead before his show Arrow sort of kept it on life support. And yeah, Arrow and later The Flash in their first few years revitalized the network with ratings that were very strong considering the source. Nevertheless, neither of those shows exactly set the larger entertainment world on fire with their success. Neither of those shows really earned money for the network, nor did the rest of the Arrowverse for that matter. And that success did not last very long, even for Arrow or The Flash. By the second half of Arrow's third season and the first half of The Flash's fourth season, both those shows began to seriously dip in ratings, in prestige, and most importantly, in quality, as both shows, which initially had relatively unique tones and styles, started to become increasingly influenced by the CW's tiring writing formulas. And none of those other CW Arrowverse shows ever got ratings or reviews that were as solid as those first two shows, Arrow and The Flash. That includes Supergirl's CW run, though its CBS run did technically outperform Arrow and The Flash in ratings. Stargirl and Superman and Lois sort of count as Arrowverse shows, despite that they take place in different universes and despite that Stargirl started out on a streaming network. And those shows both knocked it out of the park with critical reviews and with the very smooth and cinematic effects and costume work. But both those shows still got very modest to poor ratings and still did not make any money for the network. The one non-CW, non-Arrowverse show that I can recall that also fell prey to that WB embargo was Gotham, another halfway major network TV series that aired on Fox that told a coming-of-age story about a young Bruce Wayne, but that was consistently prevented by WB executives from showing either Joker or Batman on screen, except for one small Batman cameo in the series finale. Gotham was a decent program with decent ratings, stronger than every Arrowverse show, but Gotham still was not that good. It got even worse as its 5 seasons passed, and the ratings took an increasingly deepening dip. Basically, it was not a show that everyone was watching, and the limited group of people who were watching had mixed feelings about it. So yeah, when you come down to it, most of Warner Brothers' decisions to keep its most profitable characters from appearing in live action outside of movies were actually decisions to avoid allowing those characters to appear and be denigrated in aggregately poor shows that mostly aired on a nothing network. Because after all, movies tend to rake in far more cash for studios than TV or streaming. So it makes sense that Warner Brothers' primary focus would be taking all necessary steps to ensure that poor representations of their most bankable or potentially most bankable DC Comics characters on TV or streaming shows wouldn't turn even one member of a potential audience off from coming out to see those same characters in movies, and that's why it could be argued that Warner Brothers' infamous embargo was actually a smart business decision to avoid tarnishing the brands associated with its most profitable DC Comics characters, or at least characters who those executives suspected might become highly profitable once introduced in major motion pictures. Anyway, that's it. I rest my case in defense of Warner Brothers. You can all read me the riot act now, and you know what? I deserve it, because Warner Brothers' embargo decision was overwhelmingly short-sighted to the point of indefensibility. Really, there's a very high likelihood that studio meddling played a large part in the decline of Arrow and The Flash and those other Arrowverse CW shows in the first place, preventing them from being as good as they could have been in later seasons by hampering their development with the mandates to remove certain characters and storylines and to reshuffle other key stories so that they wouldn't compete with potential DC Entertainment movies. And in the end, it was all for nothing, because all those movies Warner Brothers was trying to protect with all those embargoes just ended up failing anyway, or not even being made, like the disastrous 2016 Suicide Squad movie, whose pre-production led to the mandate to kill off Amanda Waller and Deadshot in Arrow, and to Nick's plans to include Harley Quinn and Arrow's own version of the Suicide Squad. Or the never-made Green Lantern movie, whose ideation led to the mandate to not include Green Lantern in The Flash or Arrow or any other part of the Arrowverse, despite many merciless teases by the creators. Or the Blue Beetle movie that was stalled for years and tanked upon release, despite that Arrow's third season was hindered because the writers were told to drop Ted Kord from the season so that Warner Brothers could save that character for the movies. Or the Booster Gold movie that still hasn't been made, despite how Legends of Tomorrow's writers were told to drop that character from the show's first few seasons so that Warner Brothers could save him for the movies also. At any rate, let me know what you think. Sound off in the comments section below, and please, I beg you, do not be shy about telling me how wrong I am for actually defending Warner Brothers here, even as a joking flight of fancy born out of boredom, because I absolutely deserve it. Meanwhile, if you like this video and made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, ring that bell, and hey, follow me on social media as well. So long.